A Wall Street Journal editorial today asks why Jim Comey didn't resign. If he claims that President Trump was asking Comey to obstruct justice, why not then resign and call attention to it? Why instead go silent for a few months and then suddenly come out after you've been? And we don't even know that Comey came out. It was supposedly a Comey ally who told the New York Times he saw this memo, and the Times admits it hasn't seen it. But the Wall Street Journal says, well, then Comey should have, if this is true, he should have gone public, quit his job, and said, hey, we got a problem here. But he didn't do it. And one suggestion from one writer today is he acts a lot like J. Edgar Hoover. That is, he was hoping that he might be able to, if this is true, that he might be able to parlay this into keeping his job or to try to take down Trump after losing the very same job. I wanted to share with you today our friends at Waddell Reed here in Twin Falls. They're in the investment business. And for those folks out there who are thinking about finding someone who can help you plan and manage your money, I'd like to recommend Waddell Reed. They've been in business going back to 1937, one of the oldest firms in the country, offering mutual funds. Waddell Reed offers and manages two mutual fund families. In fact, it owns those two mutual fund families. These are people who know what they're doing, obviously having been in business for 8 decades. They'll take a planning approach, and they'll be looking at each piece of the puzzle that you have as a client because they help build proper expectations at Waddell & Reed. They build these around your individual needs and goals, and they help you manage money. Waddell & Reed takes planning personally. 8:35, Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Also, the Wall Street Journal says if the president actually has tapes of his conversations, maybe it's time to release them. Because if they refute anything that Jim Comey's talking about, this whole thing will fizzle in a matter of days. Now, if he doesn't have tapes, it was just a bluff and it doesn't look good for the president. Then again, if you support Donald Trump and you're one of the diehard supporters, that's not going to matter. But if you've got the tapes, say, all right, here you go, take a listen. And if nothing along the lines of what Jim Comey says happened, then there's no case here. And maybe even the investigation, the Mr. Muller's investigation goes away at that point. And the writer says, another possibility is that Comey viewed the notes as a form of political insurance, I would say blackmail, that could be useful in a future controversy. And that's where the relation to J. Edgar Hoover comes about in all of this, because Hoover served in that capacity, through 6 presidents, and during that entire time, held on to his job because he simply could blackmail anybody in public office. There's also a fellow who's another Comey ally who's talking about this. A Daily Caller says former FBI Director Comey may have been building a legal case against President Trump before his firing. That is, Comey's firing, according to a former Department of Justice spokesperson. But the spokesperson is a political appointee from the Democrat Party, as it turns out. And the spokesman explained when Trump allegedly made the request to end the investigation of Flynn in February, Comey could have immediately warned the president that the conversation was inappropriate and that a request like that should never be made again. But the Democrat went on to say, if you're trying to build an obstruction of justice case, you might want the president to keep talking. But again, legally, Comey was obligated to come forward with it. So by not coming forward with it, Jim Comey would have broken the law. And now to sit here and say, well, we were just trying to see where the president was going with all of this. Excuse after excuse after excuse. Liberals, they never take responsibility for anything. And that's what you're seeing here. They're all trying to cover up now, because when people ask legitimate questions, when they make these wild-eyed allegations, they don't have answers. Byron York at the Washington Examiner, if you're a Fox News watcher, you know York as well as a regular analyst, is not happy about this idea of a special investigation because he says, look, you've already got an investigation on Capitol Hill. It looks like it's coming to an end. Now you're going to extend it. It also raises the possibility of the Trump-Russia investigation needlessly lasting the entire duration of President Trump's first year because, yes, these things can drag on. And drag on and drag on. York also warns, he said, that people who've already been testifying before a Senate committee will now lawyer up because they know the Senate committee was just trying to get to the bottom of it. But now that there's this investigation going on by Muller from the Justice Department, if you're being called to testify, you're bringing your lawyers with you, and that's going to slow things down. It's also going to send people down rabbit holes. Now, Jonathan Turley was making that same reference, if you heard us at the beginning of the program. That could lead to Democrats being targeted as well. Who knows? Maybe the Clinton Crime Foundation, with all of its collusion over the years with the Russians. How about people bringing up Mr. Obama after the raid that killed Osama bin Laden, when Mr. Obama outed the Navy SEALs as having been responsible? It wasn't long after that a chopper carrying Navy SEALs was shot down by the bad guys and 30 Americans died. You have to wonder, when that chopper took off from an air base in Afghanistan, if one of our supposed allies with the Afghan police didn't drop a dime, calling his terrorist buddies and saying, "You're going to see a chopper flying out of here. Get your RPGs ready." Obama outed those men and targeted them, put a target on their helicopter and on their backs. We also know 11 months ago that Mr. Obama was sharing intelligence on Syria with Russia. That was according to the Washington Post in June of 2016. Funny that Washington Post suddenly has amnesia on that one. 20 minutes away from 9 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Kelton Hatch in hour number 2 of the show today. If you're just joining us this morning on Top Story, I did mention earlier, but I'll mention it again. Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game expected to join us in hour number 2. If you've got a question or comment for Fish and Game, this is the day to do it. We may not see Kelton for another few weeks, so it's your opportunity as well during the course of the next hour. 8:42. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm looking at this thermometer here. It says 37. That's accurate enough. But the forecast on my computer says a high of 41 today. Totally inaccurate. Everything I've read elsewhere says 55. And then tomorrow, the big breakout starts upper 60s, and by the middle of next week, we're going to be in the middle 80s. That'll feel nice. We haven't, to my knowledge, we've had a couple of days stretched together where it was 70 or above, but I don't believe we've had 2 days back-to-back yet this spring that have been over 80. So we're looking at the possibility coming along soon, and I'll tell you what, it's been a long and hard winter. I'm not going to be complaining about that. I'm going to miss the fact that I haven't had to shell out a whole heck of a lot lately for heating and cooling the house, but I still would like a little bit warmer weather for outdoor activities. Also wanted to mention we had a great conversation yesterday with the folks who were here from the Idaho Immunization Coalition. They were here obviously as not only guests of ours, but as well as Dr. Jonathan Tripp. His office in Twin Falls, of course, can provide immunizations for not only children but for adults too. Dr. Tripp's office is located on Fillmore Street in the city, directly across from the main post office. His office is still looking for new patients, and often Dr. Tripp's staff, the doctor and his fellow staff, they can see you on the very same day. If you call up in the morning and you're not feeling well and something's going on, they can often see you on the very same day, usually by the afternoon or early the next day. And remember, life's too short not to feel good. 8:44 now. On Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Trey Gowdy was joking a couple of days ago on television when this whole Trump thing started to gain some traction, as far as at least in the media, and the liberals screaming and yelling that Trump had to go, which they have been doing, obviously, since he first announced he was running for president. But Gowdy joked that there'd been a reaction from it from Jason Chaffetz. And Gowdy joked, "I thought he was at home recuperating." Chaffetz has announced his retirement from the House, rumored to be going to work as an analyst at Fox News. But the Utah representative still is being active, even though he's apparently at home recuperating. Last night, he suddenly popped up on Tucker Carlson's program on the Fox News channel. I know he was in Salt Lake City because you could see the television backdrop of the mountains behind him. Chaffetz is talking about this situation. Now, I don't know. I think sometimes Jason Chaffetz, and I do respect him, and I think he's among the better people serving in the House of Representatives in Washington, albeit there are times when he seems to wet an index finger and stick it into the air and see which way the political winds are blowing. And just last week, he was being rather critical of the president, I thought a little too much so. As a fellow Republican, being a little too critical of the president. But not in this instance. When he learned that there was going to be a special investigator looking into the supposed Russia collusion, the representative said, well, look, I do respect Bob Mueller.
He's as good as it gets. I mean, his credentials are impeccable. He served in the Bush administration, the Obama administration. No, he is unassailable in terms of his credentials, his background.
Chaffetz also went on to say that when it comes to the liberal attack dogs, they have nothing at this point to hang their hats on.
I think some of them probably want to believe it, even absent evidence. I think their sincerity is probably there, but a lot of them, I just don't. But if you try to go even an inch deep into what sort of evidence that they have, they got nothing.
And I tend to agree with that, and they haven't found anything over the last 10 months. It's interesting to note. Yesterday, Adam Schiff, who's one of the leading effeminates from the House of Representatives out of California, a liberal Democrat, he and some of his colleagues were yapping and yammering and running off at the mouth about all of this. The Daily Caller decided to ask Schiff and some of his political allies over on the leftist side, how come they never called for anything like this when Obama was sharing intelligence with the Russians, or, as we said earlier, accidentally outing our station chief in Afghanistan and outing the Navy SEALs as being involved in the killing of Osama bin Laden. And you know what the Democrats said? Well, that's different. Of course it is. It's your guy. And you're angry that our guy got elected, and you somehow believe. Rush Limbaugh mentioned it on his program the other day. Maybe you heard it. Limbaugh straight up said, do Democrats actually believe if they can remove Trump from office that Hillary Clinton would somehow become president? No. It would mean that the very conservative vice president, Mike Pence, would then fill out Mr. Trump's term and probably run a pretty good campaign come 2020. So what's the end game for liberals here? Again, they're just trying to create so enough doubt in the public mind that they can pick up a few extra seats in the midterm elections next year so they can try to put together another health care plan to bankrupt the country or get in the way of any ideas that would that the president currently trying to deregulate the economy to get it going again. They'd like to get in the way and bring that to an end. 848. Our telephone number for the show is 736-0300. That's 736-0300. Bill Colley with you on Top Story today on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Caller, you're on the air.
Yes, Bill, you've said a lot of things this morning, and last night, Sean Hannity had his monologue, and then he said at the end of it, you've got to go out and fight. And, I do everything I can possibly think to do, calling whether or not it's my senators or congressmen or, other state senators or, other states, congressmen and senators. And I just don't know what all it is we can do. We voted, and they're trying to, delegitimize that vote. And so last night after he got through with his monologue, I was so furious. But you feel brokenhearted because you say, these filthy SOBs are never going to quit. And what they want for us is not anything like what we want. And we've still got to just rise up and stay fighting. And it's like evil. It'll never end. And this fight will never end. And people think, well, I voted, we got him elected, and I'm going to slip back into my life. Well, I guess it isn't going to be like that, is it?
No.
I'll hang up.
Thank you for the call. I like the SOB reference. We've got the GOP and the SOB. I think that's quite appropriate. The opposition being, and the S stands for satanic, right? And yes, the devil is relentless. And that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with people who thought they had cornered the market. They thought they were going to turn this into a socialist country and set us on the path to Venezuela. They thought they were going to have grown men going into little girls' bathrooms and sharing the potty next to them. They thought that they were going to allow people to marry horses, cows, and pigs. And we're bringing it to an end, and they can't have that. They've got to continue down that road. It's all they know. 850. You're up next. You're on Top Story on KLIX.
Bill, the media choir and the Dems preach that President Trump has no political experience, and that is wrong. For an example, in order to get a project built in a city, he had to negotiate with their city council, their planning commission, their building department, then contractors with unions and their wages and benefits, then suppliers. That's a lot of negotiating with political people. By the way, Obama worked in an ice cream parlor.
Oh, I can give you a few sprinkles with that, and I'll have the guy over there in the expensive suit pay for it, because he obviously has more money than you do, and he obviously didn't work for it. He must have been exploiting you as well. 736-0300, 736-0300, the telephone number to reach our program today. The whole notion that, well, he doesn't have political experience, that was somewhat of the charm for a lot of voters out there, wasn't it? They didn't want same old, same old. I voted for Ted Cruz in the Idaho primary. I had a short list. I had Cruz, I had Jindal, I had Rand Paul, and Rick Perry. But they were all people who were schooled in political speak and the usual. And when Trump would get on stage and he'd look at Jeb Bush and call him low energy, you knew exactly what he was talking about. And the notion that we were going to send someone back to Washington, we're in a crisis, and we have been now for a few decades in this country. We were going to get same old, same old. A lot of people just said enough. And now the deep state is trying to get its stranglehold back on us so that they can deliver the coup de grace and get rid of us for good, or enslave us, or whatever motives they have. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story.
Yeah, I'm calling because I just have this feeling with this White House leak as far as the Russian and him giving information to. Don't people have a right to at least face their accuser, the people who are saying this kind of stuff, that he gave this stuff away when they weren't even in the office? It's all hearsay. It's totally ridiculous.
Totally ridiculous. And the fact of the matter is, the people who are actually conducting these leaks are breaking the law. They're felons.
But don't they have a right to face that accuser who's saying these things?
Sure, I would think so. When they find this guy, he's going to be out of a job, though, awfully fast.
Well, he better be in prison.
I'd like to see that, too. I think that would go quite a... thank you for the call. I think that would send quite a statement out there in this situation. Now, the president suggested, and media got its panties all in a wad, because the president apparently suggested to Comey that if media reprints all of this, that maybe the folks in media should go to prison too. And oh, Donald Trump, dictator, oh, fascist, oh. Well, let's review this. No, the media, the way the law is structured, the media doesn't break the law. The lawbreaker can give the media something, and media then is supposedly immune. That's how it works in this country. On the other hand, when media reported this story and said that Donald Trump put in jeopardy a possible Israeli agent somewhere in Syria, well, didn't the media also put that agent in jeopardy? So if the guy gets burned alive in a cage by ISIS, gets picked up and burned alive in a cage, will media at any point say, well, gee, sorry. No, but look at all the newspapers I sold. It's worth it. And that's why we're dealing with people here who are morally bankrupt, and frankly, they should be looking in the mirror themselves and asking the question, how can I atone? Because there is a judgment day coming. Whether they believe in it or not, the rest of us are reminding them it will come, as it does for every man or woman on this planet, and they're going to have to account for their behavior. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead. All right, well, I'm going to share one more clip with Jason Chaffetz, who I thought last night was, in a rare moment, rather eloquent. And he was talking about how the libs are setting all of this up simply for a public reaction, and that is to vote for more liberals in 2018.
They're just going to change their talking points and say this administration is in chaos, and by the way, it's under investigation itself. It had to have a special counsel. You'll hear them. I mean, you could just already hear them in advance. It's an insatiable desire. They have no ideas. They have no policies, and so it's their scorched earth mentality and approach to just say, let's burn it to the ground, and that's their approach.
Do you think, and since you work there and you're with them in the gym or at lunch or whatever, do you think the Democratic members we see on television alleging a conspiracy involving Trump and Putin believe that there was actual collusion between the two?
If they do, where's the evidence? I'm happy to pursue it, but I don't have anybody actually presenting me any evidence.
Yeah. And even the occasional drive-by liberal who calls this program just shouts and screams about, oh, the president is mean and you're mean and you're fat. And you got nothing. You've got absolutely nothing. You're trying to convince, I guess, yourselves in your own echo chamber as you sit around and sip your Cabernet. You've got deans at Yale University calling the rest of us white trash in this country. Somebody ought to take some of those people to the woodshed for some of their comments. It doesn't happen because we're dealing with people out there who believe that they know best for us and they need to control us. That ultimately is what's at stake in this country. You're up next and you're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story on KLIX.
Well, it's just like their party, who seems to be getting older and older and older in their leadership. They always fall back on the same old tricks. In this case, it's the seriousness of the accusation that they think is going to work for them again.
Yeah. Well said. And they have all their friends in mainstream media who are amplifying it. I know I said the other day that we should have several different sources of news that we look at and that we listen to and that we read. And I said it because you have to be able to filter. If the more different sources from different points of view you get, you'll be able to filter through all of the baloney because, as I said, they're trying to use the old Edward Bernays marketing message. That is, if you repeat it often enough, even if it's a lie, people will start believing it. They'll start repeating it. It's like Tina Fey pretending she's Sarah Palin and saying, I could see Alaska from my house. It got repeated so often by folks in media, or media saying Donald Trump says bigly. He's never said bigly. Sarah Palin never said that, but it got repeated so often I even hear it from the mouths of conservatives. This is why we have to learn that when we're dealing with media, as I've mentioned it before, a friend's grandfather said, and it was a good warning for all of us when we were kids, don't believe anything you hear and only half of what you see. Now, he didn't mean that in a literal sense, but it was a warning. Just because you're seeing something or you're reading something doesn't always mean it's true. You got to cast a wide net out there to find the truth sometimes. We've got a short break. News coming up from the Fox Radio Network. Kelton Hatch scheduled in hour number 2 of the show today from Idaho Fish and Game. And Kelton's available to take some of your telephone calls too as well.